I hereby call the meeting of the Brockton City Council Finance Committee for Monday, June 15th, 2020 at 7 p.m. to order. Before we begin our meeting, I would like to read the governor's order. Out of respect for public health and in response to the governor's declared state of emergency, this meeting will be closed to the public, and interested parties can instead access the deliberations via a live stream. www.youtube.com/user/TheBrocktonChannels/live. This meeting is being held in accordance with Governor Charlie Baker's signed open meeting law order dated March 12, 2020, which relieves a public body from the requirement of Section 20 of Chapter 30A that it conduct its meetings in a public place that is open and physically accessible to the public, provided that the public body makes provision to ensure public access to the deliberations of the public body for interested members of the public through adequate alternative means. Good evening, everybody. And as I mentioned at the last meeting, last time we met, I have asked the mayor and Dr. Herman and our Board of Health Director, Dr. Linda Cahill, to give us a brief update with with COVID-19. So welcome, Mayor, Dr. Herman, and Dr. Cahill. Good evening.
Good evening, Madam Chairman, members of the committee. First of all, I want to thank you for allowing Dr. Herman and Linda Cahill to give you an update relative to COVID. Many of you have already watched on the Health Equity Task Force the updates that Dr. Herman and Linda have given. But I want to thank the Council President for allowing us to give the most recent update. We are at 249 deaths. We are at active 537 cases. Total cases 4177 overall. I did send that email to you, and I want to thank Linda Cahill. She's diligent every morning and every 4 o'clock every afternoon. So with that being said, they will give the information, Madam President, and then if there's any follow-ups, we can do it offline, or we can discuss it again on the Health Equity Task Force. Thank you.
Thank you.
Like me to give the update at this point? Okay, I'm on the air. So so we can dive right into this, I'm going to share my screen and just give you the update on where we stand. And I thank you very much for inviting me and Linda to give you this update. So just starting at the very top, just to let you know kind of where it stands. In Massachusetts, there have been 105,000 cases compared to the census of the city of Brockton. You can see we've got a whole city of Brockton worth of cases of COVID-19 in the state. Looking at the overall view, and don't get, I know you're elected officials, but this is not a political map. This is a map of COVID cases. The red is bad. That means that this week, this 7-day period is worse than the previous 7-day period. So even though there's lots of blue, which is good, means that the number of cases is improving, there's plenty of areas of the country, particularly in the South, where the number of cases still continue to spread. So even though, as you can see, in Massachusetts, we've really got a good handle on the direction that things are going. The rest of the country, not so much. And this kind of shows what's called the reproductive number. Anything above 1, above the red line, all these red states over here, that's bad. That means that the average number of people who become infected is greater than 1, and so the virus is going to spread. The virus has control of the population. Here, where the number is less than 1 in green, like where we are, that means that you have control over the virus, and the virus is starting to wane and disappear. This is today's numbers as of a couple of hours ago. Today, there were 87 new cases, 23 new deaths. It's on any day where there's 23 new deaths, I don't see how anyone can be happy about that. Yet these numbers compared to 2 weeks ago and 4 weeks ago are so much better. I show you this to look at the indicators that the state uses. And we are going to try and mirror those indicators in the city of Brockton just to try and figure out how we're doing. And where we're going. And so this is where we're going. These are 18 different universities and research predictive models to try and figure out where we're going to be on the 4th of July. We currently have 7,800 deaths, and we're going to be over 8,000 deaths based on these models. It's kind of like looking at Hurricane Katrina, where you've got the spaghetti models and everybody's got a prediction of which way it's going. But what the CDC does is takes all the individual models, rates them on how good a job they've done over the past few weeks, and comes up with an ensemble model that says by the 4th of July in the state of Massachusetts, we're going to have about a little over 8,000 deaths. I wanted to share this information with you just because there's been some confusion about who gets COVID-19. The left-hand side of the screen, you can see these are the age groups of who gets COVID in Massachusetts. The average age of all comers in Massachusetts is 52. We hear that it's only a disease of old people, but that's not the case. Virtually every group, except maybe youngsters, virtually every group is affected almost equally. However, if you look on the right side of the screen, it's really the older population that are dying from the disease. So the average age of a death patient who dies in Massachusetts is 81, compared to the average age of a patient is 52. So a very, very devastating disease, as we know from what's gone on in our nursing homes in Brockton. So this is looking at the state, the Commonwealth of Massachusetts, and prevalence by county. As of yesterday, Plymouth County was a deep blue, along with Essex, where Lawrence is located. Only Chelsea has got more numbers. But it's, you know, unless you keep up with these numbers, if you look today, all of a sudden Plymouth County is looking a little better. So we've actually seen some improvement in the last day, which, and I've been following this daily for weeks. So it was really the first time that we're dropped down into that range. If you break it down even more and look city by city, and this is data from UMass from last week. It's just Brockton and Lawrence, outside of Boston and Chelsea, that are really in the deep blue and are really bad. And this kind of shows how the cases have been progressing over time, to the point where there are 431 cases per 10,000 people. Basically what that means is 4.3% of the population has tested positive for COVID-19. Now, this number, I feel, grossly underestimates the number of people who are infected, because don't forget, we have asymptomatic patients, people who never get symptoms. Why would they get tested? And people with very, very mild symptoms, just a cold or a sore throat, who would also never get tested, and yet probably, you know, should be added to that population. We can drill down even more and just look at the city of Brockton. So this is data that was put together by Allison Pinkover, who is the substance use program manager at Brockton Neighborhood Health Center. But on her spare time, using her public health background and knowledge of geomapping, she has put together a series of maps that we presented at that she presented at Health Equity Task Force, that shows where the cases are located in Brockton. This can be broken down really quite granularly, so that we can see where the cases are located in the city. Now, these admittedly are just a handful of cases. It's just cases done at Brockton Neighborhood Health Center. Admittedly, patients who live in the neighborhood tend to go there, but these cases can be overlaid with maps of the city showing household size, median income, service industry, and employment, and can take a kind of a closer look at where the cases are in the city. My own feeling is that everyone in the city is at risk, and looking at a map like this only tells us where the virus has been. It doesn't tell us where the virus is going to go. This is where it's been. So as of a couple hours ago, thank you, Linda, for those numbers, 4,177 total cases, continues to rise, albeit slowly. and 537 active cases. An active case is someone who still has symptoms. So even though we pat ourselves on the back for doing a good job, why? Because just a few weeks ago, we were up to nearly 2,500 active cases, and now we're down to 537. That still means there's 537 people in the city of Brockton who have COVID-19 and are in the process of recovering. One of the indicators that the state uses in judging how well we're doing is the number of patients with COVID-19 who are in the hospital. What this graph shows is the combined population of the two hospitals in Brockton, Good Sam and Brockton Hospital, and showing the total number of patients who are hospitalized on the top and total number of patients in the combined ICU at the bottom. So if we look back to mid-April, there were over 200 patients in the hospital, and both hospitals combined. As of today, 26 patients in the hospital, 7 of whom are in the ICU. This is really a spectacular trend, in my opinion, just in terms of how well social distancing and other measures are doing in bringing down the number of COVID cases. This is the deaths from the very beginning, so from late March all the way until today. The left-hand numbers here tell you the total number of deaths, and is the brown line going up, and we're at 249, sort of flattening out very, very nicely. If you look at it another way, what this dotted line shows is a 7-day rolling average. So on any given day, you average the 7 previous days, and you can see that the death rate is falling down. That's another indicator that the state looks at, is really coming down. We want it to be 0. We don't want to have anything above the line, and we want this brown line on top to be totally, totally flat with no new cases. We also look at the positive test rate, the state does, and what we've done is taken just folks that live in the city of Brockton, and this is data directly from the Department of Public Health up until about the middle of last week. So this last data point here is not quite accurate. We don't have all the numbers in. This was the middle of last week. But as you can see, the green bar is the number of people that were tested in any given week, and the orange bar is the number of positive tests. The brown line shows the percentage of positive tests. Back in mid-April, 50% of the people that were being tested were positive. Now, admittedly, back then, testing was not as common as it was today, and it was mainly just folks with symptoms that were being tested. But it's really quite, again, remarkable to see that the number has fallen down to 8%. I've looked at the hospital data, by the way, that's up to date to today, and it looks like that number is going to be in the 6 to 7% range as of the completed week. A little bit higher than the state numbers, which are kind of in the 3% range. So we are still a little high. Now, I know there's, just by presenting at the Health Equity Task Force, there's a great deal of interest in the city regarding race and ethnicity. The Department of Public Health has not done a stellar job from the beginning of identifying race and ethnicity. As a matter of fact, you can see on this graph over to the left, the big bright blue area is folks for whom we don't even know. The data is missing for who the race of the individuals. So the Department of Public Health has not been great, although they have stepped up and now are collecting far more data on race and ethnicity. And we're going to be able to drill down, I think, a little bit better than we have been. Again, this is data from Brockton Neighborhood Health Center, which I think, even though it was a limited sample size just from testing a while ago, they will be able to supply us with additional data. And I find this very interesting. This is a bar graph that shows ethnicity, and this is how the patient identifies him or herself, how they identify their ethnicity. And the blue bar is the expected number of positive cases one would expect to see just based on the percentage of the population that is being tested. The yellow bar is the actual number. So if you have a yellow bar, for example, in the Cape Verdean population, we would have expected to see 572 positive cases. Instead, we see 774 positive cases, far out of proportion to what one might have expected just based on averages. Again, Haitian community slightly above, those who identified themselves as American, and so on and so forth. And this data will be available to you. We still have a ways to go. We are looking at our healthcare system readiness. Basically, that is how many beds are available in the city of Brockton. Hospital beds are available. We want to make sure that if the numbers bump up again, we have hospital beds and ICU beds to take care of them. We want to have our testing capacity available to test anyone that needs to be tested. And as Linda will go over, we need to have a very robust contact tracing capability so that when someone is identified as positive, we can identify their contacts. This is the algorithm that we're following. We test people. If they're positive, they go into isolation. We contact trace anyone who they've been in close contact with, and we tell those folks they have to quarantine. And Linda will go over some of those numbers. And just as far as the future is concerned, we are looking good in Massachusetts, but so many states I'm seeing, like Louisiana, Arkansas, they had their bump, they let their guard down, and now they're taking off again. So it seems likely that there will be some kind of bump. I don't know if it'll be a small one or a big one, but until there is a cure or until there is a vaccine, the virus is out there. And the more we interact with one another, the more it will spread. We need to be able to track the virus and have a very robust contact tracing program. And I would just caution everyone who's listening, is just because things open up doesn't mean you gotta go and mingle. Don't forget, every contact that you have is with someone is a potential contact with someone with COVID-19. And the only caution I would say is, even though we are totally heading in the right direction now, we need to be prepared that if the numbers take a turn for the worse and we do see a rise in numbers, we have to be bold and be able to accept that and be able to put more restrictions in place, because clearly the restrictions that have been put in place have helped us control numbers of cases, numbers of hospitalizations, numbers of percentage positives, and doing so. My feeling is just to be prepared. Don't let our guard down. Keep watching this every day. Thanks.
Thank you, Doctor. And Dr. Cahill, do you have to unmute? You're muted.
Share screen. Okay, so I'm going to briefly tell you, good evening, everyone. I'm going to briefly tell you about how we do our contact tracing, and I'm going to give you a little bit of data from the Maven system last week. So every day by 10 o'clock, every Board of Health has to figure out what cases they want to take on for that day. And if we say we're going to take them, then we own them. If we don't take them, then contact tracing takes them and starts to follow them. We have to, as contact tracers are through Partners in Health, and we have a very close relationship with them. They will interview as well as we do. When we interview a new case, it typically takes half an hour to 45 minutes per case to start the interview process. Because not only do we have to ask the patient all their symptoms, we also have to find out who they've been in contact with 2 days before their symptoms start, within 6 feet with somebody that's not wearing a mask. And a lot of times it's a lot of people. So then we have to get their information and then contact them. And we also, when we contact them, we have to tell them that they have to be quarantined for 2 weeks. We also have to find out who their employer is and contact their employer as well to tell them that they have to isolate. And isolation is typically 10 days, but it can go longer. We've had cases since the beginning that have been positive. Sometimes, typically it's 2 weeks, 3 weeks, 4 weeks, but we've had cases for 6 weeks testing positive, mostly frontline people, police, people that work in the healthcare field. Once our contact traces through Partners in Health, contact them as well as we do. We have a nightly email if they find that any of these folks have actually worked in a healthcare setting, because then we'll have to follow them back. So local boards of health has to follow long-term healthcare facility workers. Any healthcare workers, we have to know about clusters, and any patients that become hospitalized, then we have to take them back. And eventually, we have to sign off on every single case. And I'm glad finally our numbers are starting to come down. We've been working diligently, but I will tell you this, that occasionally if we have a contact that's been negative, sometimes they'll be tested and retested, especially if they've been in the hospital, and then they finally become positive. So it's a lot of follow-up. Like I said, we have, once a day, we usually get a report from the contact traces. And I will get calls, and Evelyn LeBron, the nurse, will also get calls over the weekend for cases that are complex or need a wellness check, or we need to check on the patient right away because they might need to be hospitalized. So we will get calls on Friday, Saturday, and sometimes Sunday to call patients. And like I said, we have to sign off on all the cases in the end. Okay, this is just data from the beginning until last week. And April was a tough month. We were getting like 50 cases a day. It was rough. This is deaths by date. And again, April was pretty rough. And then this is locations of death. The others are mostly nursing homes, long-term care facilities outside the hospital if somebody passed at home. And then gender, here's some pivot tables that I did, gender. So as far as Brockton goes, as of last week, there were more females than males. And then race. Race, as you can see by the aqua blue, more Black African Americans were affected in Brockton as of last week. And we have a lot of unknowns, because when we call them, they don't necessarily have to share their race, share their ethnicity. Now, the next one is that ethnicity. So the ethnicity, we were asking at the beginning what your ethnicity was, but people they weren't always forthcoming with that information. And then for some reason, DPH had decided we're only what we need particularly is Hispanic, non-Hispanic. So if you just quickly look at the numbers, they don't add up to the total of what we have, the 4,000. So there's a lot of missing data.
Linda,
Yep.
I'm sorry, but can you advance the slides? We're only seeing slide number 1.
Oh dear, I'm sorry.
Thank you.
I'm trying. Okay, let's try it again. Saw that. I don't know why. Can you see that?
Yep.
I am
Yes.
going through them. It's
Yeah.
more of all right now. All right. Okay. I'm not in the slideshow part. Now, if I do this from the current slide. Oh,
That should be okay.
okay. All right. All right. So you got the race and we got the ethnicity. So can you see that?
Yep.
Okay. So there is a lot of missing data. So that's it for my slides. Does anybody have any questions?
Linda, on the ethnicity,
Uh-huh.
total cases,
Yeah, it doesn't add up. There's a lot of missing data. Now,
Yeah.
Neighborhood Health Center, they are great when they book their patients to have a test. They actually make sure that they ask that question or already have it in a database. When we're at a loss at the Board of Health because we get after the fact of after they've had their test. So there's a lot of times we'll get data, they'll be missing phone numbers, missing addresses. So we're after the fact of after they've had their test. Any other questions?
Thank you, Linda. Everything looks
Sure.
great. And I think, I think it's great to present this information to the public and to the counselors. And, we can always reach out to you and Dr. Herman as well. And, if anybody has any particular question, but thank you for the information. I really think it was really well done. And I know I learned a lot. So thank you for both of your hard work.
Madam President, if I could.
Yes, Mayor.
Couple things. First of all, Dr. Herman, I want to thank you. So Rick Herman, 40 years, MD. He was former ER chief at Brockton Hospital and also at Good Sam. And then Linda Cahill has a doctorate in nursing. And again, she's on loan from the school side. She'll be going back to the school side in August. But I'll tell you, they've been awesome. They have calls with me every morning at 10:45. Monday, Wednesday, Friday at 1 o'clock. We're on with all the hospitals. Tuesday, Thursday with all the nursing homes. And Dr. Herman joins me on Thursday with all the pastors as well. So we're all in this together to get the information out. I also want to thank Sue Joss and the Neighborhood Health Center for giving us the information that they have. And I know Kim Holland at Brockton Hospital and Matt over at Good Sam are ready, willing, and able to work. But we've been really, I think, pushed off by DPH for far too long. So I do want to thank the members of the council that are on the Health Equity Task Force. We sent out a letter to Governor Baker. And magic, he all of a sudden passed a law. So it looks like it's trending in the right direction, but I do want to share this with you. As you all know, Monday, Wednesday, Fridays are the new testing at Brockton High. They're peeling back because the numbers were low, but Governor Baker made a declaration today. He's strongly urging everybody that's attending any peaceful protest or any type of public event to get tested. So this week and this week only, it's going to be Monday, again, 9 to 4. Wednesday, 12 to 7 p.m. Nothing on Friday, but on Thursday, again, 12 noon to 7 p.m. And you still got to call the 844-483-7819 to call an advance hotline. So I just wanted to share that with you, Madam President.
Thank you very much, Mayor. I know Councilor Cardoso, you have your hand up. Did you have a question?
I'm sorry, thanks. That was for Linda, I already asked. Thank you, Shirley.
Okay, no problem. Well, thank you again. Thank you, Mayor, and thank you, Linda and Dr. Herman. Thank you very much for coming on tonight and sharing this information with us. And I look forward to you, in the coming months, possibly in July again, coming before us and just updating us with any changes. But thank you for all that you do.
You're
Sure.
welcome.
Thanks for inviting us.
Thank you.
Have a good night. Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Right, counselors, we can begin with our agenda this evening. Before we begin, I don't see our clerk on here with us, so let me, I guess I will be doing the, I don't see our clerk, so before we go ahead with agenda item number 1, I'm going to do a roll call attendance. Azak, present. Cardoso,
Present.
Cruz,
Yeah.
Ianieri. Counselor Ianieri on with us? Okay, Fawa, Counselor Fawa,
Present.
Lally,
Present.
Counselor Lally, present. Mendez,
Present.
Monahan,
Present.
Nicastro,
Present.
Rodriguez,
Present.
Thompson.
I'm present.
Okay, very good. So we have 10 counselors present. So Counselor Ianieri, I don't think he's on. And since I haven't heard from our clerk, Mel, I will be doing both part of the clerk as well as my my own part. So agenda item, before we begin with agenda item number 1, Counselor Nicastro.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Good evening, counselors. I want to make you and the public aware that this evening I will not participate in agenda item number 8 and I will recuse myself from deliberation or votes on item number 8. Thank you very much. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you, Counselor. Okay. So agenda item number 1, ordered. Total proposed transfer of $20,000 from Parking Authority Personal Services non-overtime to Parking Authority Purchase of Services Security Fire Control. Invited, Honorable Mayor Robert Sullivan or designee, Troy Clarkson, Chief Financial Officer, Robert Malley, Executive Director, Parking Authority. Good evening. Good evening,
evening.
invited guests.
Good evening, councilors.
Good evening. So,
Troy,
Madam Chairman, I'm happy to take a stab at this, and then obviously the mayor and Bob Malley are here as well. This is just a transfer within the parking authority's budget to help fund some additional costs they've had to provide security.
Okay, councilors, does anybody have any questions?
Move favorable.
A motion's been made
Second.
and properly seconded. We're going to do a roll call vote. Azak, yes. Cardoso,
Yes.
Cruz,
Yes.
Ianieri, Fowler,
Yes.
Lally,
Yes.
Mendez,
Yes.
Monahan,
Yes.
Nicastro,
Yes.
Rodriguez,
Yes.
Thompson.
Yes.
Okay, that's 10 in the affirmative. The order goes back to the full city council with favorable recommendation. Councilor Cruz, did you have your hand up or?
I did, but I'll ask it on the next question for Mr. Malley. We can wait till the next order.
Okay. Item number 2, ordered that the city council reauthorize the parking authority's revolving fund for revenues from parking fines up to and including the amount of $250,000 for FY 2021. Invited, Honorable Mayor Robert Sullivan or designee, Troy Clarkson, Chief Financial Officer, Robert Malley, Executive Director of Parking Authority.
Okay, this is just a reauthorization of our revolving fund. It's what we use to pay for the parking enforcement program. I'll answer any questions you have.
Sure, Councilor Cruz, do you have a question for Mr. Malley?
Yeah, just general question, Bob. Are receipts way off with businesses being closed downtown?
Oh, absolutely. At this point, back in February, I was looking at bringing in over $1 million for the year. I'm not talking about enforcement. I'm talking about the standard revenues, and probably $500,000 to $600,000 in parking violations. And then once the COVID hit, we have a lot of empty parking lots. We have very few people in the garage at this point. It's starting to come back very slowly, but we were down about $50,000 a month for April, May, and we will be also for June. So we'll be off by about $150,000 at the end of the year in revenues, meters, garage, and parking lots. And when I looked this morning, the total amount of money that has come in for parking fines for the year is a little over $330,000 up through May.
Thank you. Thank you, Madam President, Madam Chairman.
Thank you, Councilor. Councilor Nicastro.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I looked at the correspondence we received about this, as well as last year's order reauthorizing these funds. And I thought there was important information missing from this order. And so I want to make a motion to amend it to include at the end of it that it's to pay expenses of the authority's parking enforcement program, including salaries and other support costs of the enforcement personnel and capital projects of the authority. And I can send you this language, Madam Chair, but I just think it makes the order complete. It's consistent with the correspondence on it and also last year's order.
Okay,
Yeah.
Councilor, so have you Mr. Malley, do
That's-
you want to answer that? Or?
That's fine with me. That's what I thought it said.
Okay. That's what I
Thank-
thought.
Thank you, Councilor Castro.
You're welcome. Would somebody second that?
Second,
Thank you.
So a motion's been made to accept the amendment, and it's been properly seconded. We can just, does anybody oppose? Anybody in opposition? Just raise your hand. No. Okay, thank you, Councilor Castro. So I know other councils had questions on this. Councilor Thompson.
Thank you, Madam President. Councilor Nicastro kind of answered part of my question due to the limited information on the order. Troy, for those of us new on the council, can you talk about a revolving fund? What is a revolving fund? How is that different from our other funds that we have? And I guess the second part was kind of answered, but again, what are these funds used to pay for?
So a revolving fund is different from, say, an enterprise fund, because the revolving funds are created and allowed through a specific statute, and they have to be renewed by the legislative body every year. And it gives you, the council, the ability to review that every year to set the spending limit. So there are a series of restrictions on these that don't exist with other funds. So this has been since the inception of the parking authority, the way that a portion of the operations have been funded through this revolving fund that gets funded by some of the operations of the parking authority.
And Troy, how is that the 250,000? How does that come into play when it says up to the including the amount of 250? So anything above that, what happens there if collected?
I'm going to ask for Bob Malley's assistance on this, but I believe, I just want to make sure I'm correct. Any amounts that are collected over and above that go back to the city, right, Bob?
Yeah, that's correct. Over the $250,000 goes to the general fund. At the end of the year, it's transferred back to the general fund.
Okay, understood. Thank you, gentlemen.
Are you all set, Councilor Thompson?
I am.
Okay, thank you. Councilor Farwell?
Both other councilors pretty much answered my questions. I just wanted to focus on the word fines. We're only talking about revenue that comes in as a result of the enforcement officers writing a ticket, and then we collect those revenues. Is that correct, Mr. Malley?
That's correct.
Thank you. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Okay.
motion to recommend favorably.
Second.
A motion's been made and properly seconded to recommend favorably. I will do the roll call vote. Azak, yes. Cardoso,
Yes.
Cruz,
Yes,
Farwell. Farwell? We can't hear you, but
Yes.
okay. Larry,
Yes.
Mendez,
Yes.
Monahan,
Yes.
Nicastro,
Yes.
Rodriguez,
Yes.
Thompson.
Yes.
It's 10 in the affirmative. The order goes back favorably to the full city council. Councilors, agenda item number 3, ordered. Total proposed transfer of $25,000 from Commonwealth of Massachusetts Department of Fire Services to Brockton Fire Department FY 2020 General Appropriation Act, Chapter 41 of the Acts of 2019 grant. Invited, Honorable Mayor Robert Sullivan or designee, Troy Clarkson, Chief Financial Officer, Michael Williams, Chief of Fire. Good evening, gentlemen. Chief, did you want to, you have the best background right now, so would
Thank
you
you.
like to speak on this item?
Sure. So this is 25,000. That it was basically a grant coming through the Department of Fire Services. It was actually secured by Representative Cassidy. We were having a conversation about some of the facilities, meaning my fire stations, and that's what this 25,000 is going to be meant for. It's basically going to be spent in my Campello station, trying to update some things with some ceiling repair, some painting, some other thing. But that's what it's going to be spent on.
Perfect. Thank you. Counselors, any questions for the chief or our CFO or?
Make a motion to recommend favorably.
Second.
A motion's been made and properly seconded to recommend favorably. Roll call vote. Sure. Azak, yes. Cardoso,
Yes.
Cruz,
Yes.
Farwell,
Yes.
Lally,
Yes.
Mendez,
Yes.
Monahan,
Yes.
Castro,
Yes.
Rodriguez,
Yes.
Thompson.
Yes.
That's 10 in the affirmative. The order goes back favorably to the full city council. Thank you, chief.
Thank you, councilors.
Item number 4, total proposed transfer of $100,000 from auditor's office consultants to $25,000 and police department personal services other than overtime court for $75,000 to planning and economic development, other contract services. Invited, Honorable Mayor Robert Sullivan or designee, Troy Clarkson, Chief Financial Officer, Emmanuel Gomes, Chief of Police, Mary Lynn Peters Chu, City Auditor, Rob May, Director of Planning and Economic Development. Well, good evening. I don't see the chief on here with us, but I know we have Mr. May and yeah, I don't see Mel isn't on the call. I'm not sure. I didn't hear anything from her. So Mr. May, would you like to speak on this or Troy, Mr. Clarkson?
I will start out if that's all right with you, Troy.
Perfect. Yes, thank you.
Go right ahead.
Okay. Last year, we had transferred some funds from the snow budget to planning and economic development to begin the feasibility study of the public safety building. It happened in May of last year, and of course, I personally thought it was going to be allocated to the next fiscal year. That did not happen. We've now begun the planning process. We have 2 firms that we would like to bring under contract, but because we did not roll those funds, that $100,000 over into this current fiscal year, that money went back to general fund. And so now we're asking at the end of, close to the end of this fiscal year, to use some money from 2 different departments that have not expended them this year to be able to continue the feasibility study. Mr. Clarkson?
Just to follow on with what Rob said, I actually did speak to Chief Gomes on my ride home, and he asked that I speak on their behalf with the transfer. So I think Rob laid out the series of events that occurred. This is obviously an important project, and so we wanted to be able to find sufficient funds within the budget to be able to transfer to move this forward. Both the police chief and the auditor authorized that those funds be transferred. So I'm happy to answer any questions, but this is just obviously an important project for the city, and we're trying to help move it forward.
Thank you. Counselors, any questions?
I have a
Counselor
question.
Cruz? Okay.
Thank you. I see we didn't invite the fire chief, but he was just on here. This originally was, in the order, it talks about police fire headquarters, but are we now looking at separating them?
No, Rob's probably better equipped to answer that, but I have been on the committee, and as far as I know, that it's still one consolidated project, right, Rob?
Okay, I didn't see the fire chief invited on this, so I just was wondering if there was any change, but I know that was the original intent.
Council, the only reason that Mike Williams wasn't invited is because there was no money coming out of his current fire department. It was only coming from police. That's the only reason. It wasn't a slight. There's no change. It's going to be a public safety building for both police and fire, and I believe IT as well will be into that building.
Yes, sir.
Thank you.
The
money just wasn't encumbered last year for whatever reason.
Thank you. Thank you, madam.
Okay, Counselor Cardoso.
Good evening. Thank you, Madam. Rob, can you,
Yes.
Mr. May, can you, for the public, let us know what type of information we will yield from this study? Can you clarify that?
Thank you, Counselor. We will be building on the information that we gleaned through the citywide municipal building study and plan, and it identified both the police headquarters and fire station number 1 as being far below par for a city of our size and in desperate need of replacement. We will be looking at the actual needs of each department, how they interact with each other to determine where we can find savings in scale or savings in having like a centralized dispatch or centralized meeting rooms for the 2 departments. We'll also be bringing design study up to understand how the fire equipment has changed and how policing has changed and how we handle people who are incarcerated.
So best practices, policies, or just more structural?
This is all architectural in nature. However, there are accreditation agencies for both the police and the fire department that will be leaning heavily on to understand or to make improvements to these buildings. There's been new documentation in, say, the fire department, where we do more decontamination of the equipment before it's reused. Likewise, things that we've learned, especially from the COVID crisis, is that in our prisoner detention areas, we need to have better air circulation to keep people who are detained from spreading the virus. So there's a whole series of practices that manifest themselves into the physical layout of the building.
Okay, and final question, is this amount the only amount that we'll be paying for this, or are there other amounts coming down the pipe?
This is the amount that we will be paying for the feasibility study. At the end of that feasibility study, we will be coming back to City Council to talk about the next phase, which could include the development of construction documents and bidding information as we move forward to secure a new public safety facility.
Okay, thank you, Mr. May.
Thank you, councilors. Any other questions?
Motion to recommend favorably.
A motion's been made and properly seconded to recommend favorably. Roll call vote. Azak? Yes. Cardoso?
Yes.
Cruz?
Yes.
Farwell?
Yes.
Lally?
Yes.
Mendez?
Yes.
Monahan?
Yes.
Nicastro?
Yes.
Rodriguez? Councilor Rodriguez?
Yes.
Thank you. Councilor and Thompson?
Yes.
That's 10 in the affirmative. The order goes back favorably to the full city council. Agenda item number 5. Ordered total transfer of $1,500,000 from DPW Highway Division Snow Removal to City Stabilization Fund. Invited Honorable Mayor Robert Sullivan or designee, Troy Clarkson, Chief Financial Officer, Lawrence Rowley, DPW Commissioner. Good evening, Commissioner. How are you?
Good evening, councilors. It is what it says. I'm answer any questions.
Sure. Councilor Cruz.
Thank you. Actually, my question, I guess, would be for Troy. After we put this money in, where will the stabilization fund be?
As you know, we have 2 different stabilization funds, Council. We have the general stabilization fund and we have the Chapter 20 324 stabilization fund. There's approximately $6 million in the stabilization fund right now. However, it's important to note that you will see for your next meeting an additional request to transfer $2 million from the non-net school spending, our savings in school transportation, also to transfer that to the stabilization fund. And in your budget, you will see a request to take that $3.5 million and bring it back. This is a strategy to balance the FY21 budget. So we
So
identify.
there's 6 million now plus the 1.5 we're putting in, so we should be at 7.5.
That's correct. But just to be clear, we will be asking you to transfer this money back to balance the fiscal year 2021 budget.
I get that. I want to know what's in the stabilization fund now. So after that we transfer this, we'll have 7.5.
Correct.
Approximately.
Approximately.
Thank you. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you, Counselor. Counselor Nacastro.
I just wanted to point out that because some constituents have asked me about this, our stabilization funds are our savings accounts. Isn't that so, Mr. Clarkson?
Yes, indeed.
Okay, thank you. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Madam
Any
Chairman,
further
if I
questions?
If I
Mayor?
could,
Yes.
Madam Chairman, first of all, the budget books are in the chamber at all of your desks, city side, school side. I want to thank Troy and Aldo Petronio and Mike Thomas on the school side, but they are in your office today. I told you to have them today. You have them today. And they'll be up on the city website in the morning in PDF format. But what Mr. Clarkson said is extremely important as well. There'll be an order coming back. This is good because we had a mild winter, so Larry can give us the 1.5. And then the 2 million is because of COVID. There's an excess on school buses, school transportation. The school's already taken a vote on the school committee side to bring it back here, and that will be before you at the next meeting. Thank you.
Thank you, Mayor. Any other questions? Mr. Clarkson.
Madam Chairman, thank you. Just one more point to clarify. So I met this afternoon with Larry Rowley, and he does have some additional bills. The way the snow and ice works, even in a mild winter, they have some guaranteed payments that they have to make. So we will be filing by tomorrow's deadline a request for a small transfer of about $75,000 to make sure that there's sufficient money in that line for him to pay those final bills.
Thank you. Councilors, any other questions? I'll entertain a motion.
Second.
A motion has been made and properly seconded to recommend favorably. Roll call vote. Azak, yes. Cardoso,
Yes.
Cruz,
Yes.
Ian, Farwell,
Yes.
Lally,
Yes.
Mendez,
Yes.
Monahan,
Yes.
Nacastro,
Yes.
Rodriguez,
Yes.
Thompson.
Yes.
10 in the affirmative, the order goes back favorably to the full city council. Thank you, Commissioner Rowley, for being on with us. Agenda item number 6, ordered that the city council provide authorization for payment of the T-Mobile bill in the amount of $1,636.65. Library purchase of services, invited Honorable Mayor Robert Sullivan or designee Troy Clarkson, Chief Financial Officer Paul Engel, Library Director. Good evening, gentlemen. Paul, do you want to speak on this or?
Sure. Good evening, everyone. In FY19, we acquired 30 wireless hotspots to be checked out to the citizens of Brockton. The payments, or the bills, I should say, from T-Mobile went to a separate address, a different address that didn't come to us at the library. It took a few months for that to be figured out and sorted out, and by the time that it happened, we owed T-Mobile roughly $3,500 from FY19 budget. We caught this in FY20. They agreed to replace our hotspots and give us a roughly $1,800 credit, and the balance left over was the $1,600 that you see before you.
Great, thank you. Councilors, any questions?
Motion recommend favorably.
Second.
A motion's been made and properly seconded to recommend favorably. Roll call vote. Azak, yes. Cardoso,
Yes.
Cruz,
Yes.
Farwell,
Yes.
Lally,
Yes.
Mendez,
Yes.
Monahan,
Yes.
McCastro,
Yes.
Rodriguez,
Yes.
Thompson.
Yes.
10 in the affirmative. The order goes back favorably to the full city council. Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Engel.
Thank you, counselors.
Agenda item number 7. Ordered that the city council authorizes the reauthorization of the Comcast revolving fund for FY 2021 from all cash receipts from Comcast franchise fees in excess of $675,000 pursuant to the cable license contract, and that further, that the expenditure from this fund shall not exceed $750,000 without further appropriation during fiscal year 2021. Invited guests, Honorable Mayor Robert Sullivan, our designee, Troy Clarkson, Chief Financial Officer. We also have Joe Miranda, the president of the Cable Access Board, on with us in case, just to let you all know. So he's online with us, but Mayor or
Yep,
Troy,
I
did
can-
you want to
yeah,
speak on this?
Madam Chairwoman,
Madam Chair, before we start, I'd like to make a motion.
Councilor Cruz? Yep.
Yeah, I'd like to make a motion to take item number 10 collectively with this, so we can have the discussions and Mr. Miranda doesn't have to sit around till the end of the night.
Perfect.
Second.
Motion's been made,
Second.
properly seconded. Take them collectively. Anybody in opposition? Raise your hand. No, we don't need a roll call vote. Nobody opposes. We'll take them collectively. Okay,
Thank you.
Mayor?
yeah, I didn't know if you were going to read that. I can
Oh,
tell you
so
that-
I'll read number 10. Okay. Resolved that the president of Brockton Community Access Board appear before the city council to give an update on BCA's progress. Invited Joe Miranda, president of Brockton Community Access Board.
Thank you, Madam.
Thank you, Mayor, and thank you, Mr. Miranda, for being on here with us this evening.
So councilors, the number 7 agenda item is just a yearly reauthorization vote. The verbiage is the same in prior years when I sat on the council. The 750 is a cap. If there was an excess of 750, we'd have to come back before the legislative body, the city council, to seek further appropriation. But this is the yearly vote that we do relative to Comcast under the current license with Comcast. Troy, I don't know if you have any additional info.
No, the mayor is correct. So the first 675 goes to BCA for their operations. The additional monies that come in from Comcast go into that fund to be spent at the mayor's discretion up to that ceiling of $750,000. There's a little over $1 million in the account right now.
Thank you. Councilor Farwell?
Yes, a question for the mayor, and I haven't picked up the budget book yet, Mr. Mayor, and perhaps it's contained within it, but a breakdown of the 675,000, and I asked that even though this is an annual renewal, there have been some personnel changes. I don't know if the board, because it's a private corporation, has some new initiatives that they'll be funding this coming year. So I was just wondering, without getting into too much detail, where are we with respect to how the 675,000 will be spent? If either you or Mr. Miranda have just a brief synopsis.
I mean, one thing I can say, Counselor, is I don't know if it's going to be budgeted yet, but I'll tell you right now, we need to have better improved systems at City Hall. We've talked about this for several years now, and it hasn't been done, and it's unacceptable. So in terms of the actual budget dollar amount, much like previous mayors, a portion of my, it's Jensen Desnoyes, gentleman in my office that does communications, a fraction of his salary gets paid out of the Comcast, and that's standard under the practice here in the mayor's office. I don't know if Mr. Miranda has any other capital projects he's thinking about, but when we get into the new fiscal year, after we get through, and hopefully the Beacon Hill gives us the money that we really need, and we get extra money from the feds, but we need to, and I'm going to work with the council and the school committee as well. Promises were made. And we haven't had that addressed properly, Counselor. And It's unacceptable to have the city the size of Brockton and not have a sound communication device coming out of City Hall. Mr. Miranda.
Oh, Counselor Cruz, you have a question or did,
If I could follow up on that.
yes,
Just want to
Counselor.
follow up on that a little bit to the mayor. And Mr. Mayor, it would seem, and I don't know how long this COVID-19 will affect us, but it would seem that we're going to have to be able to televise live, even subcommittee meetings or other meetings of boards and commissions in the city. For example, the zoning board, the planning board, the Commission on Women's Issues, the Diversity Commission, even some of our own subcommittees, if we had a public safety subcommittee meeting. So, and I think that has to be done right away. I think if you hold one of those meetings, you have to make it available and have the public log in to a Zoom and observe it. So I just throw that out there. I know with everything else, it's challenging for you and Mr. Miranda, but I believe it's a requirement now.
Council, I concur with you all. I could tell you the council president and myself last Friday had a call with Megan Bridges, again, one of the assistant city solicitors, and your own legislative counsel, Shannon Resnick. The alternative means under the revised open meeting law allows for Zoom, allows for alternative communications, which could be television, which could be audio, which could be, believe it or not, just doing a chat and reading the comments into the record as well. So there's a lot in play right now, Counselor. And yeah, I mean, I agree with you. I don't think COVID's going away. And that's illustrated by what Linda and Dr. Rick had indicated. So everything's on the table. First thing is we have to get through the budget and try to minimize job loss. That's the number one priority as my role as mayor.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Counselor Cruz.
Actually, I didn't know if Mr. Miranda actually wants to update us on what's going on, or otherwise I can ask him a few specific questions, but under the resolve, if he wants to kind of tell us what's going on over there now, well, that'd be interesting.
Okay, Mr. Miranda, do you want to speak on the on what's going on at BCA or update us what's happened since the general manager's left?
Sure. Thank you, Cruz, for making that motion to make item 10 and 7 together. And Council President, thank you for the invitation to be here with you guys. I just want to give you guys a broad update on what's going on right now with BCA. Currently, we have 10 staff. And if you guys are watching Channel 9, you guys notice we have a new logo. And also the audio issue that we was having in the past. We updated a lot of systems here. That audio issue has been resolved right now. When you're watching Channel 9, 12 or 98, and you change the channels to maybe Channel 7, you'll notice the audio is the same with everybody. So that's been resolved. Today, we had few staff members go into the city chambers, council chambers, to see if that's been resolved. Unfortunately, that audio issue that's happening from City Hall is still happening. But the good news is on this Thursday, we have members from the school committee, City Hall, IT, BCA, and Comcast. We're all going to be meeting at the chambers on Thursday around 10 a.m. For some updates and some things that need to be fixed. We completed rewiring of Cablecast. That's what resolved the audio issues. We're currently purchasing new equipment, new portable equipment for the staff and volunteers. Currently, we updated our server. We have a 100 terabyte server installed in the facilities. We also are backed up our videos to our digital files. And there's a website people could go to, and they are able to watch our archive of other videos. We also remodeling Studio A. When you come back, people are going to be coming back to the studio. They're going to recognize some of the stuff that we're doing there. The mayor was in our meeting, I believe in the February meeting, and we had talked about some projects that we have in mind for BCA. In the past, I'm not even sure why BCA was only operating from like 10 to 4 or 6 to 10. So we talked about that. BCA should be available, let's say 9 o'clock in the morning to like 10 o'clock at night. We are changing the door locks. We're going to be changing the security system that we have. All the producers, anybody who has a show in here, should be able to come to BCA and produce a show. We're going to be training anyone who wants to produce a show. I know there's few counselors that's on here now. They are coming, they are doing shows, but we're going to make that available to anyone who's interested in producing a show that's doable. I know Council Farrell just mentioned having all the meetings be taped and recorded in the air. I'm not sure why that wasn't happening in the past. We are capable of doing that. And I encourage BCA and the city to get involved and to resolve that. Like I said, now we have 10 staff working. And in January, we was only down to 2 full-time staff. So probably that was an issue in the past, but I don't anticipate that being an issue moving forward.
Thank you. So we have had a lot of our meetings and subcommittee meetings that have been live televised, and we have councils that have taken advantage of, and we have to remind everybody the Zoom account that we use is yours, is BCA's. So you're these are you make this possible for us through your Zoom account. So thank you for all that. I do have to give a little plug. Mike Simmons has done a great job in the past few months. He's really been pulling through and helping us in many ways. So I just want to put that out there. He's done a really great job. I know you are understaffed. Is there any plans on hiring a new general manager to replace Mr. Lindy?
As of right now, we're not advertising or planning on hiring anyone. We did hire like a total, like I said, 8 other staff, and everybody's taking part of doing what needs to be done to move forward. In the future, I'm not sure, maybe 6 months or a year from now, we will definitely hire a new general manager.
Okay. But everything's moving well and working well with you, having you have enough positions that you filled. Everything's working well.
Everything is working great. It's unfortunately because of coronavirus. There's a lot of things that we wanted to get done that we had to put a little stop to it. There's a lot of updated stuff that we needed to get done. Obviously, some vendors couldn't come, and they're still not coming, so they currently rescheduling. But as the state is opening back up, we are seeing the things are coming to play.
Okay, Councilor Cruz, I see you have your hand up. You have a question.
Well, actually, you asked most of the questions that I was going to ask. So there is no plan for a full-time executive director right now.
That's correct.
And then what the request, when you're working at City Hall trying to fix what's there, will there be the opportunity for high-def cameras in the council chamber? Because the quality of camera just amazes me when I watch small towns, cable access, how much better the quality is than what we watch our meetings on.
So the other thing too, the reason why Comcast is coming down on Thursday is because we have, and the channel is going to look like that regardless, even if we get the most expensive cameras, it's because with broadcasting not on a high definition channel. So they are that with the current contract that I believe Moses has signed when he was the mayor, they promised to update us and give us the high definition channel. And that's what one of the meetings they're going to have on Thursday.
Okay, good. Thank you. Thank you.
Councilor Rodriguez, you have a question?
Yeah, just that's basically what I was going to say a few minutes ago, that it doesn't, the issue that we're facing at the chambers is not, it's not with the cameras themselves, it's in the back end of the production. It's at the cable head end that's actually causing this issue. It's not what's being produced in the chambers itself. Just like the stuff that's produced at BCA, you do a show, and when you do it on DVD and you play it at home, it's perfect. And yet when it gets broadcast, it loses a great deal of quality because of the broadcasting issue that they're actually having. But what I wanted to do is basically just, to put out, we spend a great deal of time always complaining about things, how awful things are. But I wanted to leave it here that since COVID-19 actually hit our community and the religious services ceased to exist in our parishes, especially the Catholic parishes here in the city of Brockton, BCA has actually stepped forward and helped us in the process of getting those services on a Sunday, broadcasting to the homes of thousands of people here in the city of Brockton. So I just wanted to, since Mr. Miranda was here, I wanted to kind of put that out there and thank them for doing this and helping us getting the religious services in the homes of many people. We're still doing that because although the churches have opened up somewhat, but we're still kind of broadcasting these services live on both Facebook and on BCA. So I wanted to make sure that on behalf of all the Catholics in the city of Brockton, that we basically put out, give a shout out to BCA for helping us out with that. So thank you.
Thank you, Counselor. Counselor Cardoso.
Mr. Miranda, who's the acting manager right now out of these 10 staff members?
I'm the board president. I'm overseeing the organization.
So do you collect a salary for this?
Negative.
So we don't have a manager, because as a board president, you're not management per se, right?
What's your question?
So we don't have a manager at BCA currently.
So the board president oversees the organization, and I have Phil, who's under me.
Who?
Phil.
Bill who? Mr. Miranda?
Yes.
Bill?
Did you hear me?
I didn't get the last name.
I will text you his information.
Okay, so currently there's 10 staff members and no manager, and you as a board president is overseeing the organization. Just to clarify?
You're muted, Mr. Miranda.
That is correct.
Okay, so typically that's not how a board should function. A board member doesn't typically manage an organization. So I would like to see that there's someone appointed temporarily as a manager at BCA. I think it's important.
I think that the function of the board dictates how that works, and the board decided to for me to take over when our general manager wasn't here until we hire one.
I'd revisit that, given that you are a Brockton police officer and have a full-time job, I would like to see that there would be, someone appointed as manager right now, an interim person until we replace the position.
All right, maybe you should also look at our bylaws and how that works, and we'll go from there.
Okay, will do. I'll take a look at it. Thank you.
Thank you, Counselor. Counselor Nicastro.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I would like to see the bylaws, and I did look on the website and didn't find anything. So Mr. Miranda, if you could email that to the counselors, that would be very helpful. Also, I'm wondering about, I think it's terrific that you're broadcasting church services. I've actually seen them on at least one of the channels. I'm wondering, in addition to services from St. Edith Stein, what other churches' services have been broadcast during this COVID challenge?
So,
go ahead.
So the reason why we was airing the St. Edith Stein Church is because St. Edith Stein had its members there at the church. None of our staff members went there with a camera. They did all the production themselves and made it available. That's why we aired it. We also, if any other churches out there wanted the same service, we talked about it. Whoever brought the idea, we was gonna air it. That was not an issue. Unfortunately, it is a lot of money to do what the St. Edith Stein is doing. They are fortunate to have a member that was capable of doing that.
Okay, so you didn't put it out to any other church that you would be willing to broadcast their services?
The other churches that we do broadcast their services, for example, there's a producer here at BCA that go to that church. They record it, they do the editing, and that's how we air every other churches that participate.
Can you tell me what church that is?
I don't have that information in front of me right now.
There are, Counselor, there are other churches. I know that Reverend Houston's church over on Oak Street does televise. I've seen his services, and I've caught a few. I can't name them, but I have caught a few services from the different churches in Brockton that are televised. But Mr. Miranda, if you want to get that, oh, Counselor Rodriguez, did you want to answer that question, or?
Yes, I did.
Okay, you can answer, but I do have other counselors that have their hands up. But if you'd like to answer Counselor Nicastro's question, that would.
Well, I just wanted to basically touch bases what Mr. Miranda was saying. The mass at the tri-parishes here in Brockton is produced by the tri-parish in Brockton. What BCA is doing is making the channel available for us to rebroadcast what we produce. BCA is not physically videotaping or producing those shows. We're doing that as parishioners from our own church for the tri-parishes in for the 3 churches in Brockton: Our Lady of Lourdes, Christ the King, and St. Edith's Stein.
Mm-hmm.
BCA is not physically producing or broadcast or videotaping the shows. That's something that we parishioners are doing, and the channel is just being made available to broadcast it to the communities on the channels themselves. So it's not, there's no expense associated with BCA to produce those shows. And it's something that we asked them if they could do it to benefit a large number of the folks in our communities to be able to watch the services at home, and they just made it available. We put it on Facebook, and they copy the Facebook page onto the BCA channel, and they broadcast that. So they're not really going to the services to videotape the shows.
Thank you. I just wonder if there are other churches that have production capabilities that maybe if they knew the BCA would be willing to broadcast it, they would also provide videos of their services.
Yeah, but we just to go back on that, we asked BCA to do this. It's
okay.
Like BCA came to us and said, "Would you like to do this?" We basically put a request out to BCA. So I'm sure if those other churches wanted to do this, I'm sure they will do the same thing by asking BCA to do that.
Okay, thank you. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Counselor Fowler.
Yeah, only because this has gotten a little more detailed than I thought it would. We really do not have control over Brockton Community Access, the private nonprofit corporation. Really, our only function is to approve this $675,000 not to exceed $750,000. And if I'm in error, I'll have the mayor or Councilor Cruz or some long-term counselor jump in here. So it's an interesting relationship in that the mayor appoints board members, but once those board members are appointed, this is a private nonprofit corporation. The other interesting thing is that technically all of the money that's collected, I believe now it used to be 4% of revenues in the city, now it's 5%, which comes out to about 1.2 million at one point. We only give them 675, and many mayors ago, the remaining balance went into the general fund and was used to help balance all of our appropriations, which I admit is needed: police, fire, schools, libraries. But technically, the money that people are paying in to Continental, oh, well, now it's Comcast, that 5% was supposed to be for programming services, equipment, enhanced government channels, educational channels. So I would say to counselors who have an interest in seeing what's going on or having a say in what's going on, I think the first step might be to check with our legislative council and see just exactly how much sway we have other than approving these funds, because I don't think we have much. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you, Councilor Cruz.
Thank you. And as a former board member, I concur with what Councilor Farwell is saying. It's a private board, that the way the contract was set up. The only thing that I'm not sure that is correct, Councilor Farwell, I'm under the impression, and unless it changed in recent contracts, that the extra money goes towards Massasoit and Brockton school system for cable services. Maybe Mr. Is our financial guru still in? Troy, maybe you could look into that, or maybe Mayor, you remember that, but I don't believe it goes into the general fund. I believe it is, but I could be wrong on that. Maybe Mr. Councilor Rodriguez, I know you helped negotiate that contract.
So Counselor Rodriguez shaking his head, yes, but we also have Mr.
No,
Brockton on. Oh, no.
no, I was basically agreeing with what Councilor Cruz was saying.
Okay.
That no, the funds that come in from Comcast is designated for cable-related expenses only. We're not supposed to use those funds at all in anything that has to do with general funding or whatever. Those funds, because I remember when I was with the Harrington administration, I was basically the negotiator of that contract. And the contract that we established, this percentage that actually went to BTA for its operation, the balance of whatever comes in goes into a special fund that is to be used for cable equipment, supporting school, both the public schools here in the city and Massachusetts, and BCA with capital improvement, capital equipment and capital improvement. So those funds, it doesn't matter how much it gets in terms of build up into those funds, it's not supposed to be, or it has not been used on general fund. It's supposed to be set aside for cable related expenses only. So that's how it was at least 10 years ago. I don't know how it was done prior to the Harrington administration years and years ago, but from the last 10-year contract that we settled, it was based on whatever comes in excess of what goes to, because it's the way it was decided, it was 75% of the total amount goes to BCA and the other 25% stays within the budget. I mean, within that special fund for cable related expenses only.
And I believe that we as the mayor as the funding mechanism could change that to 0% for BCA if he wanted and give it all to the schools. It's not locked into the contract, I don't believe, and I could be wrong, and it has changed somewhat through the years that I was involved. But
Councilor, through the chair, Councilor, what we actually did, there's an MOU that was signed between the city and BCA to provide that funding to them specifically beyond the contract. So there's the contract with Comcast and the city, and then there's an MOU that was signed between BCA and the city itself.
Correct. And, that MOU could, change at different times. But that money, and maybe Mr. Clarkson, you can just look into it for us when we're getting into, before we get to the other line item in the budget, just to make sure that we're correct, that it's not going into the general fund. I don't believe it is, but I would like to make sure.
Mr. Clarkson, you got that?
Yeah, Madam Chairman, that question I can answer for certain. So this, the item number 7 that's before you now is the renewal of that revolving fund. So what happens right now is that $675,000 of the money from Comcast goes to BCA through a vote of the council. The additional money goes into this revolving fund that you renew every year, has an annual spending limit of $750,000. And that spending is at the discretion of the mayor, and Councilor Rodriguez is correct, but it does have limitations. It has to be consistent with the language in the revolving fund. Now, I'll check on a couple of things though, and the MOU with BCA, and take a look at that. And if there are any other funding mechanisms in the Comcast contract, because I don't know. So I definitely will follow up on those things and provide information to the council.
Thank you. I don't know if anybody else, we've been beating this one. I'll make a motion to recommend favorably.
I did have councils that had their hands up. Councilor Fowler, did you still want to?
No, thank you, Madam Chair. Mr. Clarkson can look into it.
Okay, thank you. Actually, I just wanted to go over something, and I know that Mr. Miranda may have covered it in when he was speaking on, going into council chambers on Thursday, but I mean, that static that's on channel 12 specifically is just, we get so many complaints from constituents. And I know that we've been working for years. We've been bringing it up. I brought it up numerous times to the previous general manager, Mark Lindy. I mean, we're constantly trying to address it, and everybody keeps telling us it's the council chambers. I'm not sure who isn't muted, but please mute, because when you said you're meeting with the school department, the school, and then BCA, and a number of you on Thursday, is it to address that issue of the static that's on channel 12? You're still muted, Joe.
Yes, that's gonna be one of the things we'll be discussing on Thursday.
Okay, thank you, because I know that that's been an issue for a while, and thank you. So when you say the schools, is it the IT department at the schools, or they're filming? I know that they do some taping as well. Who are you meeting with the schools?
Yeah, the school's involved because eventually we're gonna get the fiber run between the school department and BCA and City Hall. So that's why they're gonna be involved. Because they're
Perfect.
together and everything like that. They have the cameras for the school committee.
Okay, and thank you for all you're doing. So we appreciate that. So councilors, no other questions?
Make a
Councilor
motion to
Cruz?
recommend favorably.
Second.
A motion's been made and properly seconded to recommend favorably. We're voting on item 7 and the resolve for number 10. Roll call vote, councilors, Azak, yes. Cardoso,
Yes.
Cruz,
Yes.
Fawa.
Yes, thank you.
Lally,
Yes.
Mendez,
Yes.
Monahan,
Yes.
Nicastro,
Yes.
Rodriguez,
Yes.
Thompson.
Yes.
10 in the affirmative. Items number 7 and 10 go back favorably to the full city council. Councilors, item number 8, ordered that the city council authorize the proposed tax increment financing agreement between the city of Brockton and New Westgate Mall LLC. Invited, Honorable Mayor Robert Sullivan or designee, Troy Clarkson, Chief Financial Officer, John O'Donnell, Chairman of Board of Assessors, Attorney John Tuig, Attorney Robert Creedon, Timothy Sullivan, Golston and Stores, Brian Dugdale from Golston and Stores. Good evening, gentlemen.
Good evening, Madam
And
Chair.
I'm not sure who's going to present. Good evening, Mayor, you want to speak on this?
Yes, if I could just go first, Madam Chairman, members of the committee. So I took office, we all took office on January 6th before we knew what COVID was all about. And I met with the principals representing the Westgate Mall, Attorney Creedon, Attorney Tuitt. And at that time, I expressed some concerns about a TIF for longer than 10 years. The proposal was 15 years. Now, bear in mind, we have in the past as city council given TIFs to new businesses, Crown Linen, Bernardi Auto, Keneally Foods, but we also have given them to existing businesses, and I voted on it. WB Mason was one that comes to mind. A lot of malls around here have failed. Taunton Mall's failed, Kingston Mall's failed. Westgate Mall has not failed right now. We have Chick-fil-A, we have Starbucks, we have Market Basket. Dick's just did a natural expansion moving down the hill. But when I met with Attorney Tuig and Attorney Creedon, I mentioned that, I'm pro-business. I think our goal right now in the city, in light of COVID, is to make sure that the city's interest is kept in check. So long-term, we'll get more tax revenue if the mall stays viable. And that's a fact. And it is viable right now. They had asked about this. I negotiated it in good faith. They worked with me. And then I ultimately put the cards on the table and said, the legislative body vis-a-vis the city council will be the deciding factor. I think it's short-sighted not to kick the tires on this because, again, we need a viable mall here in the city of Brockton. But I also did bring to their attention, I'm really looking for a smaller scale movie theater, maybe a 2 or 3 screen theater. One of the things that I discussed is that the size and population of Brockton to not have a movie theater. I'm not talking a big one like Randolph and Braintree because that doesn't make financial sense in light of Netflix and Redbox and all that stuff. But they didn't discount it. They would definitely give it some strong consideration. It would have to be smaller in scope. No promises were made. The only promise I made is I would put this forward to the city council in good faith. But I do think, in my humble opinion, there is past practice. And I think at the end of the day, if it is agreed to be 10 years, 15 was way too long. If it was agreed to 10 years, there will be a little bit of financial strain over the 10 years and in terms of hard dollars. But the long-term viability, it's a good investment in my humble opinion. And I know Troy had some thoughts on this as well. Thank you.
Thank you, Mayor. Troy, did you want to speak on this?
Thank you, Madam Chairman. Just to follow on with what the mayor said. So I think you have the specifics of the TIF before you, and as it was negotiated, as the mayor said, he was able to bring it down to 10 years. I think the key for me, not only with this, but for TIFs in general, is the fact that it keeps an important commercial property viable in the long term. So I think agreements like this, we have to really consider the long-term benefit, right? And so offering the tax incentives for the short term in 10 years will keep this property producing at the end more than $1 million a year in tax revenue for the city. And so despite the fact I know we're in challenging times and we're looking for every penny, but one of the reasons we didn't use the existing stabilization money to balance next year's budget is because we're taking the long view and we're trying to keep the city viable financially in the long run. And that's what agreements like this do. And so I am happy to answer any questions the council may have, but that's the perspective I think that I have, and why I think from a financial perspective, this agreement is a good idea.
Thank you, Mr. Clarkson. I know, Mr. Attorney Tuig, I know that your group had a presentation. Did you want to present it? Or I know that they asked for a screen share, so that is available. Did you want to do that, or did you want to speak on it first?
Madam Chair, we certainly could. I might just speak for a moment. Again, thank you everyone for having us. This is a difficult time. There's no question. I was involved in Attorney Rob Creedon, who has been a wonderful resource to us, was involved 20 years ago when we did the TIF. And always the issue with TIF is, does it work? And is it the right thing to do? And I think one thing you can say about the Westgate Mall TIF, it has been around for 20 years. It expires actually at the end of this month, which is one of the reasons we're here. It has worked. It did, if people remember back in 1999, the mall had approximately less than 30% of its to have tenancy. It was in terrible condition. The TIF was put in. We were able to do the Sears. We were able to revitalize the mall. We were able to actually get the tenancy in the mall up to about 97%, just to give you a sense. We also amended the TIF by way of background, where we did, and we're able to get in the market basket when the mall fell into difficult times again, and bringing in the market basket. So this is a TIF that has created real jobs. Over 500 Brocktonians work at Westgate Mall, and it's just in the center part of the mall. But we are struggling, and with your permission, we would do a very short presentation just to give you a sense. COVID-19 obviously has been a tremendous challenge to us. And I think, as you know, Madam Chair, this being your ward, that Westgate Mall has always been a community asset, even in the times that we've had during COVID, providing blood drives. We've opened up the mall for blood drives. We provided a food drive last week. We're on our 4th different food drive. It's always been very important to us to be part of the community and to keep that viable. And one thing that we think that this TIF has done and shown it can do is promote the jobs in the tax revenue. And that's really what our goal is. These TIF dollars, just so people know, they don't come without an exchange, and that exchange is a requirement of an $8 million investment in the mall, in the hiring of new jobs. We think we're going to hire about 100 people, and understand we don't get the TIF unless we're able to do that investment. And part of that investment is also enticing tenants. I don't think you should be surprised, but the last few months we've been collecting about 42% of our rent. That means about 60% of our rent has not been coming in. There's a lot of challenges going on in the retail world today, but where other malls have failed, we have not. And as a lifelong Brocktonian, it means a great deal to be sure that what was there in one of the first enclosed malls in the 1960s stays viable. So with your permission, I'd actually, Brian Dugdale, who works with me, would just briefly talk about a few items and share the screen if we could to walk through those items.
Yes, definitely. Thank you, Attorney Tu. Again, you're right. It is, it's an asset to Ward 7 and to the city of Brockton. So, that's, the mall is very important to us. So I see.
Again, very quickly, given the time and that you've been meeting for a while, I'll ask Brian to put that up on the screen so that we can just walk through that presentation.
Okay.
I'm sharing the screen now. Are people able to see it?
Yes. Yeah.
Okay, and Brian, if you go to the presentation itself.
Okay.
There we go.
Okay.
Open it.
And you can see clearly?
Yes.
Yep. I want to go, maybe Brian, talk a little bit about some of the viability issues. Go to the third slide.
Sure. As John mentioned, there's a number of threats to the viability of the mall. Obviously, before COVID-19 had come upon us, we were already facing a situation. There was e-commerce was really increasing, so it was affecting the ability of actual brick and mortar retail stores to continue to be viable. Obviously, that's accelerated over the last few years, and some of these numbers are pretty stark. And these are pre-COVID. 102 million square feet of space that was closed in 2017 alone, and then again that was followed up by another record-breaking year in 2018. Can you see this right now? Is it on the? I just want to check on the screen right now. Are you seeing?
Yeah, right.
The Westgate Mall redevelopment screen.
Let me see. Does that work? Can you see an overview now?
Yes. Yes. It's
Okay. Okay. There we go.
Brian, why don't you go to the next one if you could?
Sure.
This is an interesting chart, and just very quickly, but it gives you a sense. If you look at the line that's headed down, it's what department stores. Traditionally with this mall, and I'll date myself. When you had a Bradley's and you had a Gilchrist's and sort of later on where we had a Macy's and a Filene's, but you look at the sales over the last 17, 18 years, where department store sales have steadily fallen, whereas e-commerce sales have steadily gone up, and that's the struggle that we have. The numbers that Brian spoke to over the last 2 years. 250 million square feet of retail space has closed, just to give you a sense of sort of what's going on in the industry. And the prediction is that over the next, by 2022 to 2023, 25% of all the regional malls in the United States are going to close. And we want to be sure that we're not one of them. And how you do that is maintain viability with your tenants, maintain viability with your community. Brian, maybe you go to the one about some of the existing conditions. This just sort of talks about sort of what we've struggled with over the past few years. In 2017, I think everybody knows Macy's vacated, Toys R Us closed and went into liquidation. Fallis, who had replaced Marshalls for us, closed and had a liquidation. Sears has filed for bankruptcy. And obviously in the 2020 period where we've gone through COVID-19, if you think about the mall, the struggle that we have today, our market basket side, we've been able to add the Chipotle's, we built the Starbucks, we have the Staples, we've really expanded and made that space. Our weakness is on the left-hand side of the mall where Macy's vacated 140,000 square feet, and there just aren't the kinds of department stores out there today that we can replace that space with, and that's really the challenge. And Brian, maybe if you go forward a little bit to some of the factoids about Westgate Mall, maybe another slide there. Right now, just to give you a sense, we employ about 880 full-time equivalent employees. Over 500 of them live in Brockton. On average, we pay over $1 million a year in taxes. We've traditionally been really the city's largest taxpayer for many decades. And I think, as Brian, if you move to the next slide, I think what you'll see from a community standpoint, I mentioned them briefly, but our work with Salvation Army, with the hospitals, with the Red Cross, with the food drives, with Good Sam, with holding job fairs. That's what we have tried to do. It is very important that this remain a community hub and a community gathering spot, as we've tried to do over the last many years. as I did mention, and if you could advance, Brian, a little bit to some of the things that the TIF have allowed us to do. People say, you know, do you really do a TIF? Does that make sense? But what has allowed us to do is the Market Basket, the Chipotle, the Starbucks, Burlington Coat, Planet Fitness, the new Staples, the new liner shops near near the market. Those are the things. Traditionally, what it allowed us to do was in 1999, as I mentioned, to save a lot of the jobs that were there, to do the roadway improvements, to really bring back the mall, which at the time had only about 30% occupancy. So I would say, as the next slide indicates, that the NED proposal is really one that is rooted in its success that we have had, the success in stabilizing the mall. But as this picture shows you on the right, the challenge that we have, and we've already started doing it, is to bring in new locations on the left-hand side of the mall. Because the other thing that we struggle with is the issue of co-tenancy. In the national tenants that we have, all of whom are under challenge, I'm sure you've all read the newspaper, you know, people like J. Crew and Old Navy and the Gap, all under financial pressure, some moving towards bankruptcies. We have to, though, protect our tenants that are there. And one way of protecting those tenants is to be able to provide them some tax relief. And that's really what we use these dollars for, to protect that, but to also to allow us to invest in rebuilding what I'll call really the left-hand side of the mall. And really what that shows is the rehab project that we're done. Again, this TIF is very specific. The mayor was very specific in how he negotiated it. It requires that $8 million investment. It requires the new job. It requires annual reporting, but it allows us to refit over 80,000 square feet of space and to invest in that space so that we can make the mall stronger than it is. Now, certainly from a benefit standpoint, what we anticipate, as shown on the next slide, you know, we expect that we will have more jobs than we are building into the TIF, but we wanted to be conservative. We do expect we'll continue, as you see, over the next 10 years of the TIF, still generating in excess of $10 million worth of tax revenue, but a shorter time frame than we've ever had under the TIF. Again, something in the league of 10 years and not longer than that. And part of the TIF agreement, and I know you did all receive a copy of it, and it's highlighted in the next slide, were very important to all of us: annual job fairs, commitment to Brockton residents for employment and employment opportunities, and completing, as we have done over the past 20 years, annual reports that monitor and focus on the proposal and be sure that the commitments that the community is providing to us are commitments that are justified by the investment and by the employment. So really, if you look at the TIF exemption, as we look at it, as the mayor mentioned in the next slide, it is for 10 years. It declines. It's 2 years, 4 years, 2 years, and then 2 years, and then goes to zero. And during that time, it allows us to support them all. It does provide about $2 million over the 10 years in tax benefits, but at the same time producing $10 million worth of tax revenues and the jobs and the investment. So really, and again, in the interest of time, you know, just to conclude, we're all about maintaining the vibrancy of the Westgate Mall. We think this TIF allows us to make this investment and to be able to support it, as shown in our conclusion. It allows us to do the jobs that we need to do. So it is about maintaining its viability, preserving it as a taxpayer, preserving it as a job creator, and preserving our tenants that are there, even in these difficult times, as we last week reopened Westgate Mall. And we've been involved in this, you know, those of us from Brockton, you know, the mall's been there since '63. New England Development started over 20 years ago with this. And our hope is that you will support this. It's very important to our existing tenants. It's important to our market basket relationship. It's important to our investment. It's important to the job creation that's going to bring. So with there, Madam Chair, I'll stop and thank you for the opportunity in these challenging times for allowing us to present this request.
Thank you. Thank you for the presentation, and thank you for sending the information ahead of time to all the counselors so they were able to view it beforehand. Counselors, I know at some point, Counselor Farwell, you had your hand up.
Yes, thank you, Madam Chair. We've done ties. A tip is better. It's really important we do this. My understanding is that the assessed value of the mall is not just the buildings, not just the condition of the buildings. There's actually an analysis done of income versus expenses. And if we were to allow the mall to falter, we would in effect be hurting ourselves with respect to future revenue coming in, revenue that's badly needed for the city. The other thing that I would like the public to know, which unless they watch the meeting, they would not know, is that there is a formal binding legal agreement between the city and the mall with respect to creating at least 50 jobs, investing $8 million. The company agrees to operate a business and make all commercially reasonable efforts to maintain and add to the level of jobs. The company shall, to the greatest extent possible, fill, and this is important, said newly created positions with qualified residents of the city of Brockton, so long as such a practice and its implementation does not result in the violation of any law or regulation or operate against the best interests of the company's operations. So I hope this gets a favorable. I'm sure it will. We're thankful to have them all, and I'm very pleased that there will be annual reporting requirements so that we monitor just how well this agreement works out for both parties, for the city and for the mall itself. And I thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you, Councilor. Attorney Tui, can we just ask that you close the screen share just so I can't seem to view everybody? Perfect, thank you. I think Councilor Cruz, you had your hand up.
Thank you. I agree with Councilor Farwell. Just a couple of questions on a couple of things, really. A couple of the questions are really so the public can understand a little bit of this. I think Mr. O'Donnell's on here. He might be the best person. This TIF, or any TIF actually, is only on the additions to the tax. The current tax bill does not drop and it doesn't affect the current tax bill, correct?
That is correct.
And sometimes the public doesn't understand that and they think that this is a tax break for a business and it's not. Excuse me. Attorney Tuig, you talk about in the presentation is approximately 880 full-time equivalent employees. Was that correct?
That's correct, yes.
Now, in the TIF, I see create more than 50 permanent new jobs. It doesn't say FTE though. Is that?
Under the state statute, that 50 has to be FTE. We can clarify that, but that's what they have to be. They don't talk about part-time. You actually create more jobs than that because you have to be full-time equivalent jobs.
Okay, that's what I want to make sure that I didn't know that the state law had that, but we may want to throw that in there just to cover. Do you see the future? Where do you see the mall in 10 to 15 years? I mean, and I don't mean just the Westgate Mall. Obviously, it's a changing. Do you see that property changing?
Well, yeah, it's interesting. I mean, with New England Development, we're working on a project in Cambridge, which is Cambridge Side Galleria, which is a large regional mall, about twice the size of Westgate Mall. And that had a Macy's in it, and that had a Sears in it. And as you might imagine, the Sears went away, and the Macy's is about to go away. That's being converted more into office lab space because it's Cambridge and the uniqueness of the city of Cambridge. So I see that, and we're working on projects all over the country that are changing to mixed use developments. I have to say, and we evaluated Westgate Mall as a mixed use opportunity, but it's funny, Brockton, and it's always been true, is a uniquely situated piece of real estate in the sense of where it is on 24, how it relates to the community, its relationship to the highway. We see this actually as staying as a strong retail hub as opposed to more of a mixed use center. Our sense is Brockton doesn't need, some people, Natick and the like have tried to do housing associated with it. We don't really see it. And the other thing that we see is this acreage has always been commercially zoned acreage for the city, and bringing in a lot of residential was not our expectation. We didn't think it was good for the city. We didn't think the city needed that, although I have to say there were people who talked to us about it. So our goal right now is to keep it focused as a commercial retail center. because we think that's the strongest and the highest and the best use for the city and the communities and as a job creator. Our goal is, as market basket, we call it the strong right side. We want to make the strong left side by redoing it with potential also some entertainment uses on the left-hand side of that mall, so that we have the strong left side. And then hopefully in the long term, we know Sears, I mean, Sears is bankrupt. The Sears store is going to be available. Exactly where that's going to play and how, we don't know yet, but it is. And that will be something that we're going to have. But again, our focus right now is keeping it as a commercial retail center, not something different.
And I guess just one other question that's really more for the public to understand. One thing that's unusual about Westgate Mall, the property anyways, as opposed to most malls, and correct me if I'm wrong, there's actually 2 or 3 major pieces of property up there that are they're not all Westgate Mall LLC, correct?
That's correct. Yeah, it's very unusual. We sort of own everything in the ring road, but outside of that are a lot of other properties that are not part of the mall. But I have to tell you, that's one of the reasons why, and we've argued it with people to understand, the importance of the mall is not just these tax revenues and these jobs, but there's another 1,000 jobs, believe it or not, around us. And there's, you know, at least as much tax revenue as what we generate around us. And it's very important that that viability of the mall stays as a vibrant location, because that's what other people will say feed off of it, whether it be the liquor store or the Lowe's or other small shops that are around us. That center is worth so much to us as the city of Brockton, as a retail and commercial hub. We don't own it. That's not part of what New England Development is bringing forward, but it is critical that that hub of 60+ stores with a market basket be very strong all the time. It's a main street.
Thank you. I agree. And I just wanted the public to understand that sometimes they think this will affect the entire property, but how many acres is yours? Do you know?
We're about 40, and it really is the main street of Brockton. It became the main street of Brockton. And I think, you know, you can tell by how New England Development cares for the property. It's very important, you know, how it looks and how it is. But if you look at the entire property, you're about 120 acres. So really, yeah, to give you a sense of size.
Yeah. Thank you. Thank you for your information. I'm all set, Madam Chairman.
Thank you, Counselor. And just, I'm not sure if you covered this, but for people at home, that the TIF goes with the business. So it's New Westgate LLC. So it's not with the property. So if something else was to go there, they wouldn't get the TIF, correct?
Oh, if it were to change into a different use? Yes, that's true.
So it's
Yeah,
only the TIF, right.
Yeah.
Thank you. Counselors, any other questions or? Counselor Lally?
Motion to recommend. Oh,
Counselor Lally, and I think Counselor Rodriguez have a question. Counselor
No,
Lally.
I was just going to make a motion move to recommend it favorably.
Counselor
Thank you, Madam Chair. I just had one sort of observation. You know, Councilor Cruz noted that this is not a tax break on, you know, on what they're paying. It's just on the future. You know, on any increase in the future. But I think that the folks at home would really, you know, it would show progress, and it would show that something's being done to see, you know, physical improvements to the exterior of the mall. I know, you know, the Sears lot floods a lot, you know, maybe some lighting or something for safety, just to show an investment like that might help bring people in as well. But I think that, you know, if we're talking about, you know, improvements to the community or help to the people who use the mall, that can't be overlooked. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you, Counselor. And just as the Ward 7 Counselor, I'll bring it up since I have you here. I have gotten a few complaints, and it was just when the new Comcast store came up at the mall, and there is no direct access for wheelchair accessibility. And that's something that at the time I spoke with the building department and some of our inspectors, and I think we even made some calls to the state. But if there's something that can be done, maybe you can bring it up somewhere. I know that we do have some they're not all Brockton residents either. Some of the calls I got from surrounding towns, they, wheelchair accessibility to the Comcast store, they'd have to go all the way around to the side to be able to access the sidewalk. So if there's anything that can be done just to help the residents, that would be great. I just wanted to mention it.
No,
But
no, I'm glad you did. I'll talk to the manager tomorrow.
Thank you.
I had not heard that issue, but certainly.
Thank you. Councilor Cruz, you made a motion, and I believe it was properly seconded by Councilor Rodriguez? Yes, okay.
Yes.
Motion's been made and properly seconded. Roll call vote, Azak, yes. Cardoso,
Yes.
Cruz,
Yes.
Farwell,
Yes.
Lally,
Yes.
Mendez,
Yes.
Monahan,
Yes.
Rodriguez,
Yes.
Thompson.
Yes.
That's 10 in the affirmative. The order goes back favorable to the full city council. Thank you. Thank you, Attorney Tuig and the team from New Westgate Mall LLC.
No, thank you very much. We appreciate it. Thank you all.
Have a good night.
Thank you.
Number 9. Resolve that a representative from Mass Development appear before the Finance Committee to inform the committee about the Massachusetts Property Assessed Clean Energy Program, PACE, Massachusetts, to provide a financing mechanism to private owners of commercial and industrial properties for certain qualifying commercial energy improvements. Invited, Jay Patekos, Vice President, Business Development, South Region, Wendy O'Malley, Vice President, PACE Program Manager. Good evening. And I believe we have Rob May as well on the call with us. Good evening, Wendy.
Good evening, Madam President.
And I think Jay is on the call as well. I don't see him, but it's just yourself.
Yes, Jay Patikis is, for sake of time, will not appear. Just be myself.
Well, thank you. Did you want to speak on the matter or?
I know it's been a long night. I assume the presentation was sent out to the Finance Committee ahead of time. I don't need to take the time to go through the presentation unless the committee would like me to. I'd be happy to do a brief overview and answer questions, or just proceed as you see.
Would you mind doing a brief overview just for the people at home, because they won't just a presentation, a little bit of a really quick, presentation of what the program is, and then we'll take some questions from the counselors.
Sure. Would you like me to go through the actual slides or just give a verbal?
Whatever's easier for you. Whatever's easier for you.
I think it's easier if I'll just give a verbal overview, and then
okay, perfect.
Like me to refer to a specific slide, I can do that. So I'm happy to present this new financing program that Mass Development is looking to open this summer. This is a new financing program for commercial and industrial property owners in Massachusetts that provides financing for energy improvements on their property. This financing is unique because it runs with the property, or is tied with the land, as they say. It is repaid via a betterment assessment that's placed on the property and secured by a lien. There is a municipal opt-in requirement as part of the program, where every municipality must authorize or agree to opt into the program before any commercial property owner can apply for financing to Mass Development for this program. I'm presenting the information tonight just to give you information about the eligible properties and the types of benefits that can be seen from this program. And then if the council determines that they would like to recommend opt-in at some future date, I'd be happy to talk about that, but I'm here just to present the information to the committee.
Thank you. Mr. May, did you want to speak on this before we take questions, or just?
Yes, ma'am. This is a rather new economic development tool to Massachusetts. However, several states across the country are already using a nearly identical tool to make improvements. And these are available to existing property owners as well as new property owners. So it could be anything as simple as replacing your heating and air conditioning system or your storefront windows to make them weather tight. It's at a very low but fixed interest rate, and it's another tool that we want to keep in our toolbox. So I'll let Wendy continue.
Great, thank you.
I'll just add that no public funds are being used for this financing program. This is all being financed by third-party capital providers that would be chosen by the property owner. Mass Development is not issuing any bonds or loaning any money directly. So I wanted to make that clear as well.
Perfect. Wendy, how do people at home find, like, if they want to research, get more information on this, where would they go to look?
Mass Development has a web page on their website that is specific to the PACE program and has the information about how property owners can access the program once it's available and the eligibility requirements.
So when do you think the program will be available?
So we are hoping to launch it very soon. We're looking at July if we can get all the items in place. We have been a little bit delayed due to the pandemic. But we're at the final stages and hoping to open it very soon.
Perfect. Thank you. And once again, I apologize that you were the last on the agenda. We only had a couple of resolves, but thank you for being patient and staying with us and presenting this to us.
Madam President?
Mr. May. Yeah.
To follow up on Wendy's comments before Councilman Castro, I apologize. We have been working with the mayor's office and the law department to craft a ordinance that we hope to introduce either in July or in August that would allow the city of Brockton to opt into the program. So this is sort of a get to know you session, but we will be introducing legislation shortly. Thank you.
Thank you. Sorry, I had to mute because the fireworks are already going off and the dog is already going crazy. So I apologize. Councilor Castro.
Thank you very much, Madam Chair. I'm sorry, I've got paperwork all over the place. Ms. O'Malley, thank you for being with us this evening. I understand that this program, I did a little research, properties that are eligible for financing through PACE are not residential homes like a single family residence or a two family. This program is for commercial buildings, industrial buildings, multi-families having 5 or more units, or buildings owned by a nonprofit organization. I'm wondering, do you have any sense of the amount of your average loan? What do you think it'll be?
So we believe that the average amount, well, the minimum size loan that we believe will apply will be about $250,000. So that's about the minimum project cost. I think the average project size in a municipality like Brockton could be anywhere from $250,000 to probably $2 million for the average project. But you are a larger municipality. You do have larger buildings there that do consume a large amount of energy. So you could have a property that could be much higher than amount, but that would be the average.
Sure, okay. I found some interesting information on in the Federal Register from January. Do you anticipate any problems with existing lenders? And let me qualify my question. I'm a real estate attorney, and in the past, representing lenders in financing transactions, I was forced to pay off betterments when the municipal lien certificate came through with the betterment assessment on it. The lenders did not want those going forward. Now, you're just launching this program. You don't probably have any hands-on experience with it, but do you expect any issues with permanent lenders who are already on properties?
So we have walked through the construct of other states very carefully, and I think we've had the benefit of seeing how other states have implemented their programs and tried to take the best practices from those models. So we've created somewhat of a hybrid model based on our statutory allowances to create what we think is an open market model that will allow capital providers to participate in a way that they feel comfortable with the non-acceleration that is in our financing agreement. We are creating standard terms that all the financing entities will have to use. So we have contracts that Mass Development has drafted, and everybody will have to use that agreement rather than using different agreements for every financing entity. So we're putting things in place that we found have worked successfully in other states, including Connecticut, Rhode Island, and New York. And we think that that will avoid any of the past maybe items that other states have encountered in terms of maybe lender participation.
Right. Will this be offered directly through Mass Development or through different lenders?
Mass Development is named the program administrator by the statute. We will be administrating it and operating it in consultation with the Department of Energy Resources in Massachusetts, but we will have an open market model making it available to all capital providers who want to participate and meet the requirements that they have to fulfill for to be a capital provider in the program.
It sounds like a terrific program. I wish you much luck, and I hope it really does well in Brockton, because I think it's a great idea. Thank you very much. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you, councilors. Councilor Rodriguez, you have your hand up.
Yeah, thank you, Madam Chair. I just have a quick question for you, Wendy, if I could. As you know, our city is a little different than other communities where diversity is a major issue in our city. But yet one of the chief complaints I've had, and I've listened to a lot of businesses in the last few months in terms of the whole SBA and some of these other issues that we hear when it comes to financing. We don't do a very good job in reaching minority businesses in this community, especially linguistic minority businesses where English might not be the most preferable language spoken by some of the business owners. What efforts are you putting into play to try to reach into these hard to reach communities? Because one of the I was actually hoping that that Jay would be here so I can ask him these questions, because for some odd reason it seems that every time I get on one of these Zoom calls, the faces are always the same and the faces don't look like mine or don't sound like mine. I wanted to put that out there in terms of, we don't see a great deal of reaching out into these communities, and often people that need the help a lot more than other folks. So what efforts are we putting into place so that we can reach these hard to reach communities, or people who might not even be aware that this program exists?
Sure. Thank you for that question. What I can tell you is that we have been doing outreach to all the interested parties who are related to PACE. And part of that outreach is to the local banking community in all the different municipalities that have opted in. We hope to be one of the leading states in terms of engaging capital providers that include local banks. Local banks have not participated as much in CPACE financing in other states as you would like. That is a big interest for Mass Development, as they are big community partners in the different municipalities that we have found. So we have been working with the Mass Bankers Association to inform them about this program since we were authorized as the program administrator. And we've also outreached then to their membership about the PACE program, asking them if they would be interested as being a capital provider, as well as the relation to a mortgage holder consent role, if that is something that would be related to them. As you know, I'm only with the PACE program, but Mass Development has a number of programs, both financing and real estate. And we have outreach through our TDI program, specifically our gateway cities. We do a lot of outreach through all those different programs. I can't speak specifically to that, but I could definitely follow up with Jay in terms of your question and try to get you some more specific details about that.
Well, the reason why I keep bringing this up is because I'm really, both as a mayor in this city and as a city council in the community, often We hear that there's this funding for this, funding for that, but the people that actually need the funding or could use the funding are not being tapped. And I'm just trying to figure out how can we get these development or some of these other providers of these programs to reach into the community itself so that the folks who could use these fundings to improve their businesses are able to get the funds that they need to do that. And that's what's lacking. It seems that it's the same characters that are always getting the funding or always getting funded, but those that could actually need it most from the communities that I work with particularly are not getting the funds that they should be or aware that these programs exist.
I understand your concern. I just want to make it clear that we're not providing any funding directly at Mass Development. So we're just trying to outreach to as many capital provider partners who are interested in the program to then market it to all the communities that they serve. So our hope is that any municipality that does opt in will want to work with Mass Development to identify where there could be areas that would be best served in terms of letting them know the program's available. What
Well,
I like about
let me try
cases that
let me try another one. Will you have information in other languages so that we can share that information with the folks that we deal with in the community?
I can commit that we would try to make that available. We are just starting to open the program. So we try to make all our programs accessible to everybody. So once we open the program, we would look at all avenues to make the program accessible to everyone.
Thank you. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Okay, Counselor, any other counselors, any other questions? No further questions. I entertain a motion.
Motion recommend favorably.
Second.
A motion's been made and properly second to recommend favorably. Roll call vote, Azak, yes. Cardoso,
Yes.
Cruz,
Yes.
Falwell,
Yes.
Lally,
Yes.
Mendez,
Yes.
Nacastro,
Yes.
Monahan,
Yes.
Rodriguez,
Yes.
Thompson.
Yes.
That's 10 in the affirmative. The resolve goes back favorable to the full city council. Thank you, Wendy, for being on with us this evening, and thank you, Mr. May.
Thank you for your time.
Thank you. So councilors, a few things that ends our agenda items. But as you heard just a few minutes ago, the fireworks have already started, and I mean, these aren't little firecrackers, they're fireworks. And yes, they are driving the dog, and little four-legged family members crazy. I know that a lot of us have addressed this. We've addressed it with the police department, with our constituents, and I know I've called numerous times, and it is difficult for the police to figure out where, I know it's difficult for us to figure out where who's lighting the fireworks, but I just want to reassure everybody that we are constantly calling the police, where I know the chief has been very responsive. Chief Gomes has, been responsive, but it is a difficult situation. And I don't understand how it started so early this year. I mean, they've been going, this isn't 4th of July fireworks. And, I hope we can come to a solution, because it does. I mean, they were going off in the middle of the night, and I think this is throughout the city. It isn't just one area. I think I heard 3 o'clock in the morning they were going off, 4 o'clock, and then they're even up before the sun sets. There, people lighting them at 4 o'clock in the afternoon. So I know that we're going to work together with the police department, because they are our only form of enforcement with this, to find a solution, because I know it is a nuisance for the residents, especially. I mean, everybody enjoys beautiful fireworks, but there is a time for them, and it's not every day, every night, in the middle of the night while people are sleeping. So with that said, I did want to go over some of the next meeting schedule publicly, so people at home know what our schedule is. And please bear with me, because there has been constant changes with COVID-19, trying to adhere to a lot of the regulations of how we can meet, and how we can go, getting dates to move forward with our budget hearings. Things have changed. So as with anything, nothing is set in stone, but as of right now, we will have a special city council meeting this Thursday, June 18th, 7 PM via Zoom, and that is to accept the budget order. So that's this Thursday, the 18th. We will have a regular city council meeting, which is regularly scheduled that's the fourth Monday, which is Monday, the 22nd. That will be at 7 PM. That as well will be via Zoom. So that's a regular city council meeting on June 22nd. After that, we have our budget hearings, which I have, usually they're 3 nights, but I have turned them into two nights, condensed nights of budget hearings. And that's Tuesday, the 23rd and Wednesday, the 24th of June. And they will start at 6:30 PM. Counselors, they will take place in council chambers, and the department heads will come before us in council chambers. I have made arrangements for the public to make their public comment on Tuesday evening from 6 to 6:30. So we will be accepting public comment in advance and during that time. Those will be posted with the agendas and in the newspaper. Our clerk's already gone ahead and made the appropriate postings and in the paper, and they will be posted online and at City Hall. So we will be in council chambers. Once again, councils, as with the emails that I sent to you, I'm leaving it to your personal comfort level. If you're not comfortable being in person in council chambers, you don't have to. But I believe that I felt that was the best way to be able to present the budget, to be able to work on the budget this year. As I've gotten many complaints from especially our senior population that, the Zoom is wonderful. It's great. It's bringing us, it's allowing us to continue business with this great technology, but a lot of people at home really are having a hard time following our meetings. So having the budget hearings via Zoom, it wasn't going to be as simple as everybody seems. So that's why I decided we have the ability to be back in council chambers. So that's where we're having them. Once again, after that, we will have a special city council meeting on that following Thursday. I believe that's the 25th, June 25th. And that's a special city council meeting to discuss and vote on the budget. So all these will be posted. I will send them to you via email, but I just wanted the people at home as well to know. These will be listed in the newspaper as well as on the city website and on BCA's bulletin board. Everywhere that I can announce these, they will, we'll make sure that the public knows the schedule of our meetings. I think that's everything on my end. I see Councilor Cardoso, you have your hand up.
Thank you, Madam President. So the public only has a half an hour to speak on that Tuesday.
Correct. So Councilor, in past years, that's how it's always been, and it's been at City Hall. There have been years when we've had a handful of people there, and there are years where nobody's shown up for this hearing. So it's very hard for us to figure out, how many people are going to attend. But City Council is different than school committee. Our meetings are not open to public. They're not hearing. This is a public comment section where the public is allowed to make their comments on the budget. So that's why we have left it. Yes, it's a half an hour. That's what it's always been.
Right. So on that second day, the 24th, there are no public comments?
No.
Okay, and if anybody misses that half hour, can they make comments anywhere else or what can they do?
Well, I mean, it's most of the people that want to make comment, follow our meetings. They know where the postings are, and I have made it available via email and it will be live YouTube, that people can make the comments. I mean, that's the way it's always been. It's really just a public comment. And I mean, that's how it's always been. So we technically don't have to have them, is what I've been told. Mind you, this is all I've spoken with our legislative council as well as the law department to make sure that we were doing everything that we can. I did want to open up, it wasn't opening up City Hall, but I was going to allow the public to come into the basement, the the entryway in the basement, to be able to make public comment that night. But then there was a few discussions. So, I mean, all I'm trying to do is allow the public to, to voice their comments. And after much thought, this is the best way that I have been advised by the legal department.
Great, thank you.
You're welcome. Any other questions, Counselor Rodriguez?
Thank you, Madam President. I just wanted to take a moment just to remind Brocktonians that we just got some reports from the Census Bureau. I know we've talked about this ad nauseam in the sense that the importance of filling out the census, but we just got a report that the Commonwealth of Massachusetts, its self-response rates are somewhere around 63%. And in Brockton, we're still at 53.4%. I can't reiterate the importance of the census to our community, but the fact that we're still barely at 50% when it started on April 1st, 2 months, almost 3 months later, we're still only at 50%, where the vast majority of the people are still at home. It's somewhat sad. It's sad that we are not taking this seriously. We're not seeing the importance of the census. We will now suffer from the importance of the census because every single funding that comes down the pipe to benefit this community relies on census numbers, and yet we are not taking this stuff seriously. So I'm just making an appeal again to those that are watching us right now, those that will watch us on YouTube, that we still have time to do this. We've got plenty of time to fill out the census because 53% is not acceptable. You know, when the rest of the state is at over 63% and we're still at 53%, and we are a community that needs it more than any other community in the Commonwealth of Massachusetts. So please, folks, please, please, please do take your 3 minutes. It takes you a total of 3 minutes to do this online. Please fill this out because our kids need this, our seniors need this, the police and fire need this, and we need this funding more than anybody else in this Commonwealth. So please fill that out. We still have time to do this. Please fill it out.
Thank you, Counselor. And I know I agree with your appeal, and we do have to, our residents need to return the census. But I know that this isn't just a Brockton problem. I know a lot of cities are experiencing the same issue. And this year, actually, I know you did a lot of advertising.
I don't know if you could see this, but this is the numbers I just got.
Yes, we see that 63.
It says Brockton is at 53.4% when the state itself is at 63%.
Yes, no, we see that. So like I said, we agree with you, but what's the next step? I mean, I know that part of this program was to get some agents out there knocking door to door and getting the, residents. How is that the next step? Is that already happening? I know I filled mine out a long time ago and I got
Madam President, the next step is in July, they're going to start sending people into homes now. And with this issue of COVID-19, it's going to be very difficult to get people from the outside. And these are individuals that we don't particularly know, in a sense, that will be showing up at homes. And by law, they have to do this. So a way to kind of avoid that whole interaction with people that you might not know is to go online and fill this thing out. I mean, it's not that, again, it takes a grand total of 3 minutes. And like I said, mine took me about 4 minutes or so because I couldn't remember the date of birth of my daughter proper way, so that's what you actually have to do. And I think it makes very little sense that we're not putting the effort as a city, since we need it more than everybody else. That's what I'm trying to get to. Our city needs to get over 100,000 people. And the only way we can get over 100,000 people is by getting people to get out there and do the census thing.
And I agree with you. I watch, our local cable channel. I know you've done advertising on there. Have we moved on advertising like on some of the, like Channel 5 or 10, some of the Channel
Yeah,
7?
they're doing it. Yeah, they're doing it all over the country. I mean, every time I'm watching CNN from time to time, you'll see some census commercials being done of the importance of the census. We try to do what we can to communicate with everybody about this, but what we need to do is we all need to get off our collective tushes and get this stuff moving in the right direction, because we're hurting the future of this city.
Well, I agree with you. But I think
It's 10
everybody has to
years.
take part, everybody, I think, I know I've asked people, have you filled out your census? And maybe that's what we should be doing. We really have to do something, but we're right here with you to support that. So we'll support that. We'll do whatever we need on our end. And I know
Thank you,
you're
ma'am.
all doing a good job to get the word out. So we'll
Thank
try. Brockton has to do better. Before I forget, I know the mayor mentioned in the beginning, and I just mentioned our schedule for the budget hearings, but I do want to thank him and thank Mayor Sullivan and our CFO, Troy Clarkson. They did say that they would have the budget books for us, for us to view and go through today on June 15th, and they were there on our desks this afternoon. So I do want to thank them. They are there. You can pick them up at your convenience, as well as some other reading material. And we'll see each other again Thursday evening and then next week. But if anybody has any questions, please always feel free to contact me. Councilor Monahan, you have your hand up.
Yes. Just this little note, this Saturday, one of my constituents, Melissa King, is going to have a drive-by birthday for her young grandson, Adrian, who will be turning 2. He's also autistic. Hoping I get my colleagues to drive by. The mayor has already promised he will. We're trying to get some fire and police vehicles. They want to meet at the corner of Antonia Terrace and Manamet Street around 2:45 and drive by 34 Antonia Terrace around 3 o'clock. So if you're around, stop by Saturday. Thank you.
Perfect. Thank you, Counselor. And I know you did a great job posting that on social media to get some support. Perfect. Well, I know I'll be there. I don't see any other counselors have any questions or comments. So with no further business before us this evening, this meeting's adjourned.